Hey, and welcome to Bite Size Chat today. I'm excited because the guest we're going to have is a friend of mine, but also someone with a depth of knowledge. And for that reason, I chose to do something which relates to heritage. She's of a Jamaican descent, I'm of a Ghanaian descent, and I think it's going to be an awesome treat for our guest. Let's have an insightful conversation and let's inspire the world. So we're just gently going to flour up the workstation, make sure that dough doesn't stick. And then we'll take our dough that's been chilling in the fridge and lightly loosen it up. Then we'll roll out our dough on the surface. Make sure we don't roll it too thin. And once we've finished rolling it, we just dust off the excess flour. Then we'll get our circular dough cutter and cut our dough into circular shapes. Now we'll take our filling. We've gone for a ground beef filling, and then we'll fill our dough about 2.5 spoonfuls, and then we seal the ends of the dough with the egg wash. We'll carefully roll out the dough and fold it over, and then seal the ends with the back of the fork. Now our patties are ready for the oven. They've been baking for about 25 minutes, ready to serve. Hi, Ann-Marie.
Hi.
There you go. There you are.
Okay. Well, I have to say you're pretty brave for making beef patties for Jamaican women, but we'll see how you do.
Well, your taste buds will be my judge.
Well, they look good, so let me give it a try. Let me warn you, I don't have a poker face, so don't expect me to pretend I like them.
No pressure. No pressure. No pressure. All right.
So we'll just dig in.
I think go for the big one.
Oh.
Bold, you know.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Okay.
All right. All right, let's try.
They're a bit hot, so.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
Out of
It's
10?
actually really good.
Out of 10?
I'm impressed.
Okay.
They flaky.
Yes.
Nice. Oh wow. The meat is
Flavors?
really good. Well flavored.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I might just have to give you a Jamaican card here.
Oh, hello.
Not quite. I said might.
All right, okay. I'll hang on to that. Hi, Ann-Marie.
Hi, Ernest.
We are here.
We're here.
Yes, I think we've been meaning to do this, and life has been lifing.
Yes, but we're finally here.
We're
so
finally
it's good.
here. We're finally here, and I'm glad that you actually enjoy the patties.
Well, I was impressed. I actually have to tell you, it tastes really well, really good. It was actually a very familiar taste, which is good. I was impressed that you even decided to make beef patties, considering how critical I am of your food. So
I know.
very impressed, very impressed. But thank you. This is really good.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. And I'll make some batch for the freezer for you.
Always good to hear that. But you always have to share with the rest of the team, because when they hear that Uncle Ernest made food, they're like, "Oh, well, we're gonna get to try it." So they love your food, which is great. So the kids will love it.
Are you suggesting like a secret freezer somewhere where you only know and go there and get it for yourself?
Well, I do have one, but because our refrigerator is really interesting. It has 3 layers.
Okay.
And you can hide things in different layers because people only know about the 2 main layers. So I try to hide it in the top, layer so they don't see it. So I have a place ready for it. So yeah, definitely
Okay.
bring it, and I'll have a place.
Well, I will deliver, and whatever happens in your household, I don't want to be responsible for it. So.
Well, my husband will say otherwise, but we'll see.
Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining this little project that I have with SJ going on. As I've said before, I think the inspiration was all about trying to get people like yourself to inspire. We've spoken, many times, and I love your story. I love where you are, how you've done it, and again, doing it cross-continent, I think it's also not easy. But before we get into all of that, people might be watching us, listening to us, and not really know who's this person. So if someone was to introduce Ann-Marie, how would they introduce Ann-Marie? How would they describe Ann-Marie?
That's a simple question, but very loaded, you know.
Go for it. Go for it. I would love you to just go
It's,
for it.
it's the elevator speech, right? What do you say about yourself if you only have 10 seconds to introduce yourself? But when I think about me, who I am and my journey, I have to say, the way I would describe myself is that I'm an individual that was chosen by God to fulfill His will. And, I was bold enough and audacious enough to think that I can actually accomplish all that He wanted me to do. And so I think of myself as that person who's trying to be all that God called me to be. And it's a very, audacious plan, but I know that because I have his support and because that's his will that I can actually accomplish it. And so faith for me is a big deal. It's foundation. It drives a lot of what I do and how I operate.
And I think it's interesting that because when someone maybe watching us will look at us, oh, what's this all about? But I like you lead with it. I like when you lead with that. And with that, I think what during your early years, you live in the US at the moment, or you live in Taiwan, but US resident. But you apparently grew up in Jamaica.
Yes.
What was that in that early years that made you realize that this is what I'm supposed to do?
Yeah. Well, I had an amazing childhood growing up in Jamaica. I love growing up in Jamaica, the culture, my family was there. I had a really big family, both on my father's side and my mother's side. And I think for me, I always knew that there was something big that I was supposed to do. I always knew that I was not supposed to stay in Jamaica. And, as a child, I always had this relationship with God where I would actually go talk to him and say, hey, this is what I would love to do. What should I be doing? What do you want me to do? And it's very strange to, think a young child would have this relationship with God. But from an early age, I actually had this relationship where I knew that God exists and I knew that I can go talk to him. And I talked to him as a friend. And that has shaped who I am today in terms of being able to have that kind of relationship where it's a friendship. And, I'm comfortable going to him. So I think from earlier on, I knew there was something else I was supposed to do, and I wasn't supposed to stay in Jamaica. I was supposed to travel, and I always had dreams about traveling.
I like where you've ended it because I wanted to go there. Did you do a lot of traveling in your early years?
No, not. I mean, when I left Jamaica to get on a plane to come to the U.S., that was my first time leaving the country.
Okay.
So that was a big deal for me getting on the plane. So I'd never traveled before, but I always dreamt of it.
Right.
So I knew there was another world beyond where I was.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to explore it.
Yeah. And in that time, I think, how old were you?
I was 9 when I came to the US.
Okay. So I guess for a 9-year-old, it's exciting. I've got 5-year-old, as you know, and whenever she has to go on a plane, it's weeks non end of questioning. It's weeks and it's just dreaming about what I'm going to do, what I'm going to wear. And was it similar for you?
Well, my father was traveling to the US before we went to the US. So we would go to the airport with him and see him off.
Right.
And at that time, back then, you could actually walk into the airports and, go to the gate with the person and you can watch them get on the plane and they fly off. So that was really cool for us to be able to see that. And then we also look forward to the food. So we knew airport food was different and we would get something different. I tasted sausages for the first time at an airport in Jamaica. And I was like, whoa, this is real. This is interesting. This is airport food. And so we always looked forward to taking my father to the airport when he was going back to the US, or my grandmother when she came out to visit. So we anticipated getting on the plane ourselves.
Okay.
And I have 2 sisters that we grew up with, that I grew up with, and both of them traveled with me to the U.S. as well with my mother and my brothers, and we were all dressed alike. So all the girls had the same outfit on, and we're 2.5 years apart. But my mother loved to dress us alike, so we all had the same outfit, and we got on the plane, and it was just exciting to be able to do what we saw my father do for so many years.
Yeah, and then I guess moving forward, take it to now. You're in the US. You're very young. How was it like just trying to adjust to your new world, your new society?
Oh, well, it was difficult in the beginning because when I came from Jamaica, I had a very thick accent. So my Jamaican accent, I would say things and kids in school can be so cruel because they were like, well, what did she say? What is that? And they just never understood what. And I'm like, well, I'm speaking English, but they just never understood me because my accent was so heavy. And so they would make fun of me or they just didn't want to talk to me. So what I started doing was mimicking them. So I would mimic what they do, how they say certain things. And so that's how I learned how to speak American English, I guess, or to assimilate. And that was the thing back then for young kids. When you go into the U.S., you wanted to assimilate, so you kind of denied who you were. I have friends from all over the world who would refuse to speak their native language because they wanted to assimilate. They wanted to be so American because they knew they didn't want to be different because they didn't want kids to make fun of them. So that was something that I had to learn myself. But my father was very interesting. He was in the U.S. living there for a couple of years before we arrived. And he was so proud of being Jamaican. And he always instilled in us the importance of keeping our culture. We, speak patois. So I speak patois. When people hear me speak patois, they're always surprised because when they realize I've been in the U.S. for, so long, they're like, why do you still know how to speak this? But because my father never forced us to forget it. And I really love that.
And that's very important, actually, because I share a similar story. I moved to the UK much older than you did. And at the time, it was still not acceptable to be African. If you were Black, you have to pretend you're a Caribbean to be accepted in a society in many ways, right? Even in college, if days we would go out, if you said you were African, they'd look at you like fresh off the boat, and you could have lived there for many years. But if you said you were Jamaican, it was cool.
Jamaicans are cool anywhere you go in the world.
I know. I think many Ghanaians actually, I mean, I would say that, but I might be overstretching it. But growing up in Ghana, people would like to associate themselves more to Jamaicans than anybody else.
Interesting.
But in the UK, I think from what you're saying, it's very hard to be yourself as an African kid growing up, and eventually, and now it's changed. Now it's completely changed. Now there is Dirty December. Everybody want to go to Ghana in December, or Nigeria, or South Africa, or people are traveling more. People are experiencing more. So that it's not the same. I hear my 18-year-old sister. They probably would go to parties and never have to listen to Bashment. But for us, there was no Afrobeats.
Yes, now Afrobeats have taken over.
It is.
I mean, first it was Caribbean music, it was reggae. Exactly. Now you got Afrobeats everywhere.
So I think that was but like you said, keeping that culture. I want to just sort of go on a bit about that. How was that? Because you spend a lot more of your time in school. So how did you maintain that culture? I know we come home but you spend less time at home usually than you would spend outside. So how did you manage to maintain that culture, that authenticity about yourself and where you're from?
Well, I attribute a lot of that to my late father. And I will say, because he was such a proud Jamaican, and he, even in Jamaica, you have differences where people from certain parts, they look down on people who are from the countryside, and we're from the countryside.
Right.
So, for us, we were very proud to speak patois at home. We always did. It was fine. But then outside of that, you were kind of looked down upon as being the lower class. Like you don't speak proper English. That was the term, proper English. You need to speak proper English. Yes. And so with my father just always encouraging us to be who we are. And he was in the U.S. for 30 years, and his accent was still very. I mean, you could hardly understand him. And sometimes, my friends would come.
And
to
I
the
love
house,
that.
and they're like, "What did your father say?" So I'm interpreting for my father, who's lived in the U.S. for 30 years, and I've only been there for a couple of years. But I think for me, that helped me. And I'll tell you this is interesting. My mother was a nurse, so she used to go to work early in the morning, and my father would have to make us lunch for school. And here I am in elementary school. My father's making me lunch. My father made me fried dumpling, ackee, and saltfish. And I go to school for lunch, and I open up my container. And of course, the smell comes out. And all the kids are like, "What is that?" Oh my gosh. And they all get up and they come and they're surrounding me. And they're like, ew, what, because everybody's eating bologna sandwiches or ham sandwiches. And here I am with this cooked home food, which is, great. It's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
But that's not what you send your kid to school with for lunch. My father just never, he's thinking he's doing something great. He's
Yeah.
making this great lunch for his daughter.
Yeah, of
And
course.
I'm like, so I had to go home and tell him, Daddy, you can't do that. They don't do that. They don't do that in America. You need to buy me bologna. They eat bologna sandwiches. And he's looking at me like, what? I just made the best lunch ever.
Yeah.
But I'm like, no, we don't, they don't do that here. You have
You
to
can't eat that in
bologna
school.
sandwiches, ham sandwiches. So always my father was that type of person. He was always true to who he is.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. And that's I think that's a shame that a lot of these days people just some of us have lost that,
yeah.
You move to certain places and you want to fit in as much as possible. And sometimes, okay, situation, but I've maintained that my kids would grow up and know they're Ghanaian, they're Kenyans, and yes, you're born in the UK, but that for me is all very, very important for them to represent themselves or as Kenyans, as Ghanaians. And if whatever it is, wherever they have conversation, I find that if you can represent your true self and your heritage, there is more to you. You're more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the things you grow up thinking you should be ashamed of, or you don't want people to be aware of it, that you are this person, or you grow up realizing that, wow, that's what makes you special.
Exactly.
I mean, even with being from Jamaica, and you talk about in the UK how it was seen to be more likable if you're from the Caribbean. For me, Jamaicans, I would come to the U.S. When I came to the U.S., most Jamaicans that I met were from Kingston. No, I'm
Okay.
thinking to myself, how is it that this country, all the people that I've met are from Kingston? Nobody wanted to be from the countryside. Nobody wanted to be, because everybody knew that most people knew Kingston.
Right. So even if they were from the countryside,
They wouldn't say it. They would say they're from Kingston because that was more prestigious.
You get a bit like that because when I tell someone that, oh, I'm Ghanaian, oh, you're from Accra, I was like, brother, no. There are lots of different regions in Ghana. I'm from Takoradi. I'm from the West Coast, closer to Ivory Coast. I'm like, oh, so you speak French? Mayor. No, I don't. And it's interesting, like you said, that I've stuck to the fact that I want to represent me and where I'm from, who I am, and like just like yourself. And the more I've done that in work settings, especially, people are more interested in to talk to me.
Yes.
They want to know. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Because obviously, the first thing is living in the Western world, US or Europe. People just assume, oh, you were born in the UK. Oh, you might be Caribbean, you might be African, but you don't really relate to anything. So when you tell them that you know where you're from and they get more interested.
Yeah. It's the same with Caribbean music, right? With reggae music. I've been in so many places where I meet people who love reggae.
Yeah.
And they can tell me about Bob Marley and, So, this little country, so Jamaica has a saying that we're little but we talawa. That means, we're small, but we can do big things, just like track and field.
Yeah.
We're known around the world for being track and field champions, right? So it's interesting when you travel and you see how people love your culture and value the things that you sometimes don't want others to know about you.
We should be proud of that.
Absolutely.
We should be proud of that. Talk to me about traveling. So you're in the US now. Did you do a bit more traveling while I was in the US?
When I started college, I started traveling.
Right.
So that was my opportunity to go abroad. When I started undergraduate in Middlebury in Vermont, they're big on languages. So it's a language school. So it's a very small liberal arts school in Vermont. But they have, I believe now it's 12 different language schools.
Oh, wow, okay.
And so
that's quite big.
Yes. Well, for the languages, because that's part of, their the programs that they promote and what they're known for.
Yeah.
And so they have other partners around the world. And, I started studying Chinese. And so I took the opportunity when I was a junior to go to China. Yeah. So that was my first opportunity to travel, go outside of, the US.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on that. And this is natural. You just dropped me in there, right? I first heard you speak Chinese in a restaurant. And my wife and I were like, whoa. Because it was like the native accent. It was the eloquency about it. I was like, what? We didn't expect that. I mean, of course, you studied that in school, but I've been trying to learn Chinese since I've moved to Taiwan you can't get it. It's just very difficult language. How can you do it so easily, so fluently, so just like, hey, yeah, I'm drinking water. It's just like, yeah, it's just second nature.
Well, thank you. I don't think I'm that good, but I've learned how to how to survive in certain situations, and the right things to say. And going to school in Middlebury, I will say, I mean, it's an excellent program. I did their summer school,
Mm.
and the summer school program, you sign a language pledge. You're only allowed to speak that language that you're
Oh,
studying. So
oh,
you're
really?
you're you're pretty much stuck with the people that you're studying the language with. If you're a first year, you're walking around with a notepad with words or phrases that you use regularly.
Wow.
You eat in
Okay.
the cafeteria with the same group of people. Your teachers, most of them live on campus with you, so you
Okay.
really get immersed into the program. So that really helped me. And then, of course, when I went to China and I was able to just sort of use what I've been learning all
Mm.
these years, it really helped me. And my teachers there, they always encouraged me. They said, you have to mimic the locals. They said, don't
Okay.
try to speak Chinese
Yeah.
like an American.
Yeah.
You have to mimic, like overdo it. When you're saying certain things, pronounce it in a way that sounds, you have to sound very native. Try to sound like them.
I do that here, but that's because I'm a more of a sound person.
Mm.
So if you set something to me, I can mimic the sound, but I don't know if I'm saying the right words per se. So I think that advice there is, I guess, what I've been doing when I'm trying to learn Chinese. Because I remember in the lift one time at work, and I think I got the wrong floor, and I said, "Oh boy, I see." And then the person turned around and looked at me like, "Oh, 我中国很好嘛." I was like, "Oh, no, I don't know if I said the right word, but I think it was a sound, right?" So I guess it goes to mimicking.
Yeah, it's the sound. You kind of, you get close enough, and then the words will eventually, become more clear. And even watching TV, I
Yeah.
would have to watch the news. They made me watch the news so I can see how the locals speak, and certain tones, how they say
Yeah.
certain things. And each region usually have a dialect as well. So sometimes you pick
Right.
up certain
Right.
things from those,
I mean,
areas too.
I think my first experience of Chinese language is obviously living in Taiwan, but China is a huge place.
Yeah,
So I guess it would be different. So
very different.
compared to Taiwan, which is like a tiny island,
Very different.
you can get away with learning what you know, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I think with that, is that what shaped your view of traveling, living abroad one day? And here we are in Taiwan. Your education, all of that, did that shape your thought of, okay, I want to live abroad one day?
Well, I'll tell you this. My interest in Asia and even studying Chinese came at a very early age. As you
Okay.
remember, when I came to the U.S., my accent was very thick.
Mm.
People, kids didn't want to play with me, so the playground actually shaped a lot of my views of
Right.
Asian culture and what I'm doing now. So my friends on the playground were from Vietnam, South Korea, China. I had friends in Laos, from Laos, Cambodia, and so a lot of the Asian friends I had in school really influenced and impact my views on the culture. When at recess time, there were three sets of girls on the field. You had one set of girls that were playing the single jump rope, right?
Right.
Those are more the popular girls.
Yeah.
Then you had a second set of girls. They were playing double dutch, so it's two ropes,
Right.
right? And they would let me play, but I couldn't turn properly. So they wouldn't, so in the beginning they let me play, but then they would snatch the rope because you can't turn. You're
Right.
double-handed. So I couldn't play with the first set of girls because they were the more popular girls. I
Yeah.
couldn't play with the second set of girls because I couldn't turn the rope
You weren't a
properly.
popular girl?
No, not in the least. But then there was the third set of girls, and I stood there and watched what they were doing. And it was a very unique style of jump rope that they were doing. And there were different maneuvers that you had to do at different levels. And I watched it, I figured out what they were doing. And I went and asked, I said, can I play with you?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, sure. I was a very tall, elementary school girl. I grew pretty fast.
Yeah.
So, they wanted me to play with them because the taller you are, the better or harder it is for the other team to do these maneuvers.
Right.
So they thought
Right.
it would be good for them to have me on their team. So I started playing with them, and I was very good. They were playing Chinese jump rope. So it was Chinese jump rope that I learned to
Okay.
play. And all those girls that I played with, those are my friends. I would go to their house. I would eat with their families. And interestingly, I was one of the only friends that they were allowed to have over their house to play. And I didn't understand that for a while, but then I realized my friends told me, they're like, oh, because when you walk in our house, our grandparents see you take your shoes off at the door.
That culture.
Exactly. And they thought that was a sign of respect.
Okay.
Like here
Yeah.
she is, this American girl, you know, living in America at that time,
Yeah.
knows to take her shoes off when she enters a house. That's something we did in Jamaica.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
take your shoes off before you walk in the house. So for me, that was
Yeah.
natural. But they loved that. And so because of that, I was one of the few friends they were allowed to have over. And I remember one conversation I had with my friend's grandmother. She would always make these Chinese egg rolls, and they were great. I loved them. But she never spoke English. And I would tell my friend, tell your grandmother, these are great. I love them. Thank you for making them for us. And her grandmother wouldn't understand, but she would shake her head. And I said, you know what? Tell her. And I don't know where I got this from, but speaking of the audacious young woman, but I said to her, I said, tell your grandmother, one day we're not going to need you to translate or interpret for us anymore. I'm going to be able to have a conversation with her on my own. And she was like, yeah, sure, right. You know, kind of dismissed me. But she told her grandmother, you know, say, hey, Ann-Marie says she's going to be able to talk to you one day. You guys can have a conversation. And lo and behold, I went away to college. And I actually first got interested in Japanese.
Yeah.
But I didn't stick with it. I switched to Chinese because that was always something I wanted to do. And the first summer I went back and I found my friend. I said, let's go to your house. I need to go meet your grandmother. And I went to her house and I met her grandmother again. Her grandmother said hello. And I started speaking to her in Chinese.
Oh.
I was so glad this woman did not pass out because, you know, here you have this 90-year-old grandmother looking at me, speaking to her in Chinese, and she understood everything I was saying.
Wow.
And she remembered. She said, I remember her saying that she would be able to communicate with me. She's like, wow, look at her. She's doing it.
Yeah.
And, you know, just for her to remember that and to remind me of this dream I had was really, you know, touching.
And it's actually impressive that something that I also like to do sometimes is self-prophecy. You know, sometimes you have this little feeling about something you would do, and it seems so great, so bigger than where you are and who you are. But keep saying that over your life. Yeah. Keep speaking over your life, you know, and life will life. But I think there is something greater than us. Yeah. You know, he who is greater than us would always make our prophecies come true. And I think for his means. And I love that, you know, you went back. And it's actually an interesting story you shared there, which is you going back to represent yourself again. Yeah. You know, and I think to them it would be like, here's a girl who comes in here, respect our culture. Now she's gone even beyond that to speak our language. You know, and I think it's quite interesting. So, you know, now you're going through college, you're learning languages, and was that your career? Was that something you did as a career, or it helped in your career?
Oh, it absolutely helped. And, you know, I had a really good professor and mentor in college. And when he realized I was learning Chinese, I was the only Black girl or Black person in the program. And they really were, you know, encouraged by it, and they wanted me to succeed. And my counselor said to me, he says, get rid of any boyfriends you have. He's like, you're going to focus on studying and you're going to get this.
Did you?
And I did. I did. Because he said to me, he said, the person you're with now, you're not going to be with them later. Trust me. And I was like, oh, okay. And he had a good point, which really, you know, so I thought about it, and I was like, wow, these people really want me to succeed, and they put in every effort behind it.
Removing every obstruction.
And, you know, when I started struggling, they brought in the best tutor for me. Wow. And I would meet with this person regularly every week, and they made sure that I got it. And, you know, to your point about why do I sound, you know, the way I do when I speak it, is because I had, you know, really good foundation. They really made sure that I got it, and my foundation was strong, and from then I could build on it. But just having that support system, you know, and knowing that I could actually make a career out of it. And my mentor, he actually planned it out for me. He said that after you graduate from Middlebury, you're going to go here. So I ended up going to the Johns Hopkins Nanjing Center in China for a year. Okay. And I studied there as well. Okay. And, you know, he told me all the things that I need to do, what options I have.
Yeah.
Just having someone who's been through it, who kind of see everything from a broader lens,
Yeah.
to be able to point me in the right direction and say, hey, here are all the different things you can do with this, and so if you're interested, this is how you do it. And so that was really helpful. That really guided me. And so when I went to grad school, I was in Hawaii. I went to Hawaii for my master's in business.
Right.
And it was a China focused MBA.
Okay.
So
yeah.
it wasn't, so the way the program is set up is a joint program between the University of Hawaii and the Japan American Institute for Management Science.
Right.
And they're sponsored by Fujitsu,
Oh,
Japanese
wow. Okay.
company.
Yeah.
So our core business courses were at the University of Hawaii. And then all the marketing and more focus in China language courses were at the Japan American Institute for Management Science.
Okay.
And so they combined both of them. And part of that program is that you went abroad to do an internship. So I went to China. I interned at the Foreign Commercial Service in
For a
Shanghai.
year. Right.
And so that's sort of where I got the interest to be able to help and support U.S. companies that want to do business in China.
Right.
And so after finishing that program, I was able to work at the Department of Commerce in the U.S. to support U.S. businesses that had interest in doing business in China.
Tell us a bit more about what you do. A bit more about that. So you work for the government or the U.S. Office, and then now you're in Taiwan. Obviously, complete different thing you're doing. Can you touch a little bit more on what you do now?
Well, it's actually very similar to what I was doing at the U.S. Department of Commerce, because there it's supporting U.S. companies that wanted to do business in China. So here now, being in Taiwan, I'm supporting the company to do business in Asia. So not just in Taiwan, but all throughout Asia. So as regional president for East Asia Pacific, I cover all of Asia, which also includes, India, China, and Australia, New Zealand. So supporting the company expand, figuring out where the opportunities are, where they should be looking at for the future opportunities, and what's the steps, and making those connections to be able to leverage those when it's needed.
So that learning Chinese has been really relevant, because I guess now, you go across Asia, most people speak Mandarin or some level of Mandarin, which is obviously going to help with what you do, even if it's a basic understanding of what the other person is talking about, or the other people sitting across the table. What has been the one thing that has surprised you in your career? And I think it's broad, because obviously you spent some time working elsewhere, but if you look at when you started working to where you are now, what would be the one thing you see, look back and say, wow, okay, that I didn't expect as a career?
Well, being here, the dream, fulfilling this dream, right?
Okay.
Because when you think about it, I didn't expect to be here at this time. I've always wanted to go abroad and to live overseas, with my family.
Yeah.
So my husband, interestingly, he also studied in China as well. So he has a China background. And then, with our kids, we wanted to expose them to different cultures and, give them the opportunities that we had, because we both loved living abroad. We loved living in China. He lived in other places as well. And I really love that. And so one thing I do, I don't do the New Year's resolutions.
Right.
I do the plan. So I write down my 1-year plan, my 5-year plan, my 10-year plan, and my 50-year plan.
50.
50, I do. I'm expecting it, I'm having conversations with God about that.
Yeah.
So I write down these plans, like things I want to accomplish, dreams I have. So every year I write that down and I update it and I check off the things that have already been accomplished. And then, I may add new things, or I move things to year 5 or, year 10. But one thing that I had on my list, it was, I did this, 3 years ago, was that I wanted to have a position of vice president. And then I also wanted to have a position overseas. I wrote that down. I said, this is what I want. And within a year after writing that down, this came, to fruition. And I never expected it, because at that time I had started a new job with the previous company. I loved it. I had a great boss. We were doing great. She was really helping me and, developing me. So I was really looking forward to continuing in that company, a really great company. But then I got this email asking to meet with me to discuss an opportunity. And I thought, well, no, I'm really happy where I am. I'm not interested. And I even told them that. I said, thank you, but no thanks. And they said, well, just come in and talk to us about the role. We just want to, and I
Right.
didn't know the company or anything. And so when I went, I said, okay, what I got to do? So I went in and I spoke to them about it, and they sounded really interested. And I said, okay, we can, go to the next step.
Mm.
And so I interviewed for the job. The job I interviewed for was not this job. I interviewed for a
Okay.
job in the US.
Okay.
And I was, really excited about that because as a lobbyist, I was a lobbyist for many years in the
Right.
US. And, part of development and, reaching the next level in your career is to head or lead a government affairs office in Washington, D.C. That's an ideal position. And this is what I was interviewing for with the company. And I finished the interview and, waited for a response. And I did get the call and they said, well, unfortunately, we're not going to offer you the position. I said, okay, well,
Okay.
I really wasn't looking, this is just something that I ended up, interviewing for, but it wasn't something that was on my list of to do anyway at this
Right.
point because I really was enjoying my job where I was. And they said, no, you don't understand. We have a better position for you. We think you're more suited in a better role. And I thought, oh, that's interesting.
Wow.
And they started talking to me about the role. And they said, oh, it's, it's a vice president position and you'll be overseeing our business in Asia. And I thought, okay, so I'll do this from the US. And they said, no, but you'll have to move to Taiwan to do this. And I thought, oh, okay. And so, I thought, oh, and that's when it hit me like, wow, wait a minute. I've always wanted to do this. And so I went and spoke to my husband about it. We prayed about it, talked to the kids about it.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, let's do this. Because this is not a decision I could have made on my own.
Right.
Because this is a family. It's going to impact the whole family.
Yeah,
So everybody
of course,
had to be
of
on
course.
board with it.
Yeah.
And, I said, okay, we'll do it. And then when I agreed to take on the role, they said, oh, by the way, it's not a vice president position. You're a regional president. And I thought, oh, look at God. I was like, so you just...
You funny man.
I was like, okay, this is interesting. So,
Yeah.
it's just interesting to see how God works because this is something I've always wanted to do. I never knew when it would come and I didn't expect it to come at the time when it did. So sometimes you plan and you just don't know how things are going to turn out and you just got to trust God.
I think it was a sermon a few weeks ago at church, and Pastor Brad was talking about how God's time is like an African man's wedding time. It's like it's we think we went to a wedding and he has to start this time and finish at this time, and there was no setup, there was nobody there, and it was just an empty room. And it was like 4 hours later or 5 hours later when it's supposed to start, people start showing up and people start decorating, and it was like, okay, this is new. But it's a bit like God's time. It's just
God's
like
time.
I'm expecting this to finish this time and do because I prayed about it. Because no, not now.
Yeah.
No, not that one. A better one. And it's interesting that you talk about that. When you look at that, all of that, what was it that reinforced your commitment to leadership? Because you're now going above what I guess in your plan the next step is, and then now is a bit more up. What was it that reinforced your commitment to that leadership role?
Yeah. Well, first I had to understand or know that I could actually do the role. I think sometimes we struggle with that, saying, well, can I do this? This seems a bit, more than what I can handle.
Yeah.
So I had to make that decision and say to myself, well, surely I can do this. I've been preparing for this. But, I always have to go back to God's plan because the previous role that I had, I was only in that position for 1 year. And that manager that I had, my boss at that time, she was extremely supportive. And her and I just really got along very well. And what she did, she allowed me to do the work that she hired me to do. And that built my confidence, to new levels. And I think for me, that was necessary. And I think, and I even told her this before I left. I said, you were only there to prepare me for this role. I said, this was temporary.
Yeah.
This was temporary. I needed her. I needed to be in this position to know that I could actually do what was coming up next.
Yeah.
Because of that, because she was such a good leader, she helped me to understand what it means to be a good leader. And that really impacted me. And it helped me today in terms of deciding what type of leader I want to be.
Yeah.
So the people that work with me, I like to support them. I encourage them. I help them figure out what's next. I
Yeah.
never want anyone to come work with me and feel that this is their job for the next 5, 10 years. We have to
Yeah.
figure out what comes next and how
Yeah.
can I help you get there, even if it's preparing you for my job. If that's what you want, that's what I should be preparing you for. As a good leader, that's what I need to do. And so I take that very seriously.
Any leader who's listening, hear this and hear this well. Prepare the people who are your subordinate, if I can use that word rightly, prepare them to be able to take over. That's the only way we can build a legacy. That's the only way you can build a sustainable, good leadership, right? I'm just going to move on to something that I've seen and I found interesting. I think from where you are in your position and your role, it's so unusual to see a black person. No, but actually, it's even more unusual to see a black woman. How have you found that?
You know, I'm actually used to being the only one in the room. So for me, at this point, I've been there, done that. You know, when I used to travel to China back in 1995, a lot of times I was the only one, in the classrooms. You know, when I went out, people would take pictures of me because, in some places, especially some of the rural places we visited, they'd never seen a black person. And then, even back in the US, being a lobbyist, when I first started, a lot of times in those meeting rooms, I was the only person that looked like me. And then things started changing. And I remember actually going to one meeting. I walked in the room. This is when I first started with a previous company. And I walked in the room, and they were used to having a white male represent this company. And
Okay.
so someone came to me and said, "Are you in the right room? Are you?" And I thought, "Wait, are you trying to help me figure out if I'm lost, or are you really trying to help me here? Or are
Really?
you trying to tell me I don't belong?" It was very confusing because I thought, well, how should I interpret this? Sometimes you don't want to jump to any
Yeah,
conclusions. You want to give people the benefit of the
yeah.
doubt, but he was clearly asking me if I was in the right room because he didn't think that I would be in this room with these type of people, because these companies that were being represented were very, big companies, Fortune 50 companies, and why is she here? So it was that
Wow.
mindset.
And you'd like to think that. I mean, I would think that corporate America is changing. It's changing gradually. Um, Having that experience, what are some of the things that you're dropping as you go along to help change that narrative?
Well, mentorship, I think, is good. And, we talked earlier about leadership and being a good leader, right? And helping the people that are coming up to take on your roles and your positions understand that they belong. They belong here, and, their difference is going to help them to develop and reach, new heights. And so they should embrace that. And to not let anybody tell them that they don't belong. Know that they belong.
Sense of belonging. I feel like we started off with understanding your culture and knowing that you belong because you have that culture. And here we are having to play that same sort of perspective in life, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Be yourself and understand you belong, and then just using that to also help other people. I think wanted to touch a little bit more about your personal life, family life. I'm just sort of leading to that with what you do. It can be hectic. Regional president. I can only imagine the amount of times I would just, maybe let's schedule for next week, or maybe let's just do that. Not this, but other things as well, right? And your schedule is very, very busy. So, I can only imagine how that feels for your family. How do you balance that?
Wow. Well, it's people talk about work-life balance. There is no such thing because you,
Really?
you just
I think the Scandinavia's thing different.
you have to take every moment, every step, when it comes and figure it out. And of course, having a good support system. I mean, my husband's amazing. I mean, he helps take care of the kids. He cooks. He do so, and I couldn't do it without him. When I have to travel on these trips, he's home with them, and
Right.
that's something that is very important for us to make sure that we are always there for our kids. There's
Yeah.
someone there taking care of them. It's not a nanny. It's us.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's some people who just that's all they have and that's all they
Yeah.
can do,
Yeah.
and that's fine. But for us, we definitely wanted to make sure that one of us was always home.
Yeah.
And so he's there when I'm not, and so that works really well for us. But it takes me back to a story in terms of just being grounded and knowing that you do have this other life that you have to do.
Yeah.
You go to the office
Yeah.
and you have this corporate life where you have assistant people are doing stuff for you.
Yeah.
But then you get home and you have this life that you have to also follow, and you have a role that you have to play. Indra Nui, I read her book, so I love her biography because I read her book, and she said she had just gotten promoted as president of Pepsi Cola, and she
Yeah.
went home and she told her mother, and she was so excited, and her mother said, "Oh, can you go to the store and get some milk?" She's like, "What? I just did you not hear? I'm president of this big company
At work.
yeah, and
Not in this house.
right." And her mother's like, "Hey, leave that crown in the garage. When you come in this house, you have a responsibility as a mother,
Yeah.
as a wife, as a daughter, and you
Yeah.
still have to fulfill those responsibilities." And so that's how I feel. When I get home, there's things I have to do. I have to clean my house. I have to help my kids. Figure out what they're gonna do with sports, or my daughter wants to get her hair done. I have to help. So you still have that role that you have to play, regardless of what you're doing in the corporate world.
But is there any specific sort of characteristics about yourself, or I guess strength, that you use to balance that? When you're here, you're like this, but it's the same thing when you're at work. I could be like that, where I have some things that are my home, the organization. I can't function with this organization, And when I'm at work, sometimes my colleague that I work with, she's like, "I think maybe I need Ernest this time to just help me with this organizing thing." So, what is the one thing about you that you can say, "Oh, that doesn't change"?
Well, I'm a planner, so at work, I plan things out. I have team meetings. I say, okay, let's plan, what are we supposed to be doing? What are we working on? And, what are the steps we need to be able to get there? At home, I'm a planner, so I plan out our trips,
Right.
our vacations. I provide agendas. Here's our schedule for the 5-day vacation.
Or colorful
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
on the calendar.
I do it all.
Fit me in.
Exactly.
Well, Eliana wants to go on one of those, so
Well, I have to plan one for her. Exactly. So, but I love that. I love planning things out to make sure that everything is in place and we have the right things set up, the right, whether it's, the hotels, the flights, all that is planned and scheduled. So there's nothing that we're missing when it comes to executing. And so that's how I'm at work. I like to sit down and plan, how is this going to happen? What,
Yeah.
what's the next step?
yeah. And I think, with that balancing act, is it something you take from home to enrich the work you do? Something that you think, if I walk out of this place and I'm going to work, I'm doing it because of the people that I've left behind.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I think compassion. I have compassion at home with my family, with the kids, and everything. So when I take that take that to work with me. So the people I work with, they know I'm a different type of leader. I have this one young lady. She have a young daughter, and the daughter was sick at home, and she was just terrified because she's like, well, her husband's working, he's gonna have to take off of work, and she's like, well, and she was afraid to ask me, and I came and asked. I said, you have a laptop, take your laptop, work from home. And she looked at me, she was so shocked, and she's like, you're okay with me working from home? I said, yeah, why wouldn't I be? If you're going to be at work, worried about your sick child. If you're home, you can put her to sleep and you can work. So I want to be able to bring that compassion to the people that I work with as well.
And I think these days that is changing. I think we look back at, was it 3 years, 4 years ago now? The thing that happened that everybody was talking about, it kept everybody indoors. I think because of that, people are, leaders are becoming a bit more accepting of people working flexibly.
Yeah.
Although it's changing now, people want people to go back to work and all of that. I think that's seen a bit more. Before all of that, it was quite difficult, to see leaders who are compassionate.
Yeah.
And it was just, you come here, you work here. If you don't like it, you go, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's interesting. That was something you did before something else has to happen for everybody to realize
To see that it can work.
yes, it can work.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we're going to wrap it up. But 15 years, Ann-Marie. She was 15. She's moved to the UK. To the US. 6 years. What would she think of you now?
That I'm still dreaming. She'd say, wow, you're still dreaming. You keep dreaming, because our dreams have gotten us here. You know, we dream and believe that we can actually accomplish those things that we see in our dreams. And I think, that's one thing that has pushed me, because I never say no, or I can't do it, or that's impossible. Like, wait a minute, if I can think about it, if I can dream it. I'm a visual person, and I dream a lot. I think a lot. And, I have stories in my head before they happen. My husband would call them something else. He was like, but for me, that drives me to be able to dream, because I dream beyond from where I am. I don't, if I'm here now in this situation, I dream beyond that. What comes next? And I get excited when I dream. And so, I think my 15-year-old self would say, wow, look where our dreams have gotten us. Keep dreaming. Don't stop dreaming.
Was there a shift in mindset before those dreaming starts, or it's always been a dream?
It's always been. I think that's always how it's always been, that dream, and then realizing that I can do it. And when it happens, you kind of already prepared yourself, because, I know I saw it in my dream. I've played this role already. So I know this role. This is familiar.
I love that. Was there any question that you wanted me to ask, and how would you have answered?
What is my strength?
What is your strength? How would you have answered that?
I would say my difference is my strength.
My difference is my strength.
My difference is my strength. I bring a different perspective to the room. I bring a different, way of thinking and looking at things. And that, to me, is a strength, to be able to come to the table with something different, something that's never been done before, something that everybody else in the room is not thinking about. So my difference is my strength.
The uniqueness. And that's born out of being authentic self, understanding who you are, maintaining your culture, not trying to blend in and be what everybody does.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ann-Marie. Thank you, Ann-Marie. Is there something you would want our listeners to know, or is it something you wanted to ask me for this show?
Well, first of all, congratulations on this, on
Thank
doing
you.
this. In talking to you, I know this is something that you've always wanted to do, you dreamt about, or you just, but being able to put it into realization and executing is another thing. And I think for you to be able to do that and having great partners to work with you is definitely a blessing. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So my question for you is, where do you want this to go?
I think, similar to you, this was a dream. This was a dream of changing generations and how they think and how they see themselves. As I'm in this position, I'm of this color, I'm of this nature, I'm in this family, I can't do certain things. And I want to showcase the people that I have around me and their achievements, and use that to change that mindset. That's what I want. That's where I want this to go. I want one day, maybe a 12-year-old, 15, 20-year-old who's listening to us now, 30, 45-year-old, whoever is listening to us now, to say, hey, I listen to your podcasts, or I watch your stuff on YouTube, and that changed the way I was thinking, because that person you spoke to inspired me. They have a similar background. So I want this to go as bigger as it can, and so we can have many more guests who have various experiences that we can share with everybody. And if the testimony is changed one person's life, it's achieved its goal.
I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you for coming, and maybe we can do this again.
As long as you make more patties, I'll be back.
I'll add Carrigo onto it.
Now you got me. Definitely.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Wow, I really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you, Ann-Marie, for joining us today and sharing that wisdom with us. I hope that you've got a lot of knowledge from it too. If you have, please share, like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube channels. See you next time. Thank you.